to Streetpilots Garage. Underneath me, you see a 2021 Indian Scout Bobber 60 that belongs to a client of mine and also a follower of mine on Instagram. She reached out and asked if I would be able to assist with building her bike similar to that of my own. And fortunately for her and for myself, she does live almost down the street. So what is this video going to be about? We're going to do a little series of putting stuff onto this bike because you guys have harassed the crap out of me to do it. And I also did forget certain key modifications when I built my own bike. So we're going to show you the nacelle. We are going to show you levers. We are going to show you the Freedom Performance Radical Radius exhaust. Try saying that 3 times fast. And in addition, we are going to show you the complete fender removal, subframe plate installation, 1920 solo seat installation, Streetpilots solo white installation, and then eventually we're going to do front fork blinkers on this from Streetpilots as well. And then lastly, we are going to be doing the HD Wheels 240 kit on this bike. So we're going to do it in a limited series run where we're going to segment it and make sure you guys stay tuned because I also have news about new exciting products that are coming to the Scout community from the generation of 2014 to 2024. There's a company that reached out to me to test fit a product on my own bike that I will be talking about at the end of this series. So if you guys are ready, let's get wrenching. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to remove your seat and remove your rear fender. And the process here is pretty easy because we are going to be going with a 1920 solo seat. By the way, the seat has been discontinued. So for all you guys out there with this generation of Scout Classics, Bobbers, 20s, Rogues, whatever you name it, unfortunately the seat has been discontinued. So my advice is if you're looking for a 1920 solo seat, call your local dealer and see if they have any left on their shelves. Because on the Indian website, since it's been discontinued, it is no longer shown. However, we have been able to source them across Canada by just calling local dealers. Yes, it took 3 tries because some are useless, but nonetheless, we found them. In addition, for all you guys with the 2025 or newer bikes, the 1920 solo seat from this generation, it works. It will bolt up, it will sit. The only awkward part is when I install it, I will show you, is the upper plastic plate that will sit underneath this seat does not fully cover your battery and relay box. So just be aware of that when you're doing it. But unfortunately right now, there is no new floating seat on the market. And yes, we can name some of those Springer seat companies, but those companies kind of mount up with a fender on the rear, but they do not mount up with any subframe plate, whether it's mine, whether it's Tank Machines, whether it's anybody else's, it will not line up. And in addition, you don't put springs when you have shocks. Springs go on hardtails. Please remember that. So without further ado, let's show you how to do this. Super simple. First thing you're going to do is you're going to unclip your seat from the pin located at the nose of your seat. Pull up gently. After you have unpinned it, slide your seat out, and just like that, your stock seat is gone. This is where you'll find the pin. This pin will have to be removed for the 1920 solo seat. To remove it, you're going to need a deep 13mm socket, but I have loosened it for the purposes of this video, so remove this pin. After the pin has been removed, we are ready to take apart the fender. The fender is super simple. You have Allen bolts, more Allen bolts, more Allen bolts, one hidden Allen bolt, and then a couple 15mm hex head bolts. So what you're going to want to do is first pull off your license plate bracket. It is mounted with 4 Allen bolts underneath here and underneath on the left side and the right side. So to pull these out, we're going to use our trusty 5mm Allen. So with the 4 bolts out, you can now remove your license plate. Now it is time to remove your two side plastic brackets that hold your taillights, and in addition, they support the metal liner of your fender. Now before you do this, please remember to disconnect them via the electrical connectors under your seat, which I will show you here in a minute. So what you're going to find underneath your seat is two gray connectors and two white connectors. They will be connected to each other. The 3-pin will be on the right side, the 5-pin will be on the left side. If you are in an international bike, you're going to have a 4-pin and a 6-pin, and if you are a Scout Classic, you're going to have one big junction connector. So the wiring is different, the polarities are different, but all you need to do is pull this tab back and disconnect the left side, and then push this tab in and disconnect the right side. It's just that easy. Now with your wiring disconnected, you are safe to disconnect the Allen bolts supporting the sides of your fender. So they additionally will be number 5 Allens, and they are pretty easy to remove. So remember, this bike is all metric, and even though it's an American brand, I do not know what those measurements are in bald eagles, but out here in Canada, this is number 5 Allen. Right side is off. Now let's remove the left side. Left side is off, and this is what I mean when you got to remove the metallic fender liner. It is just a little piece of sheet metal that can be removed. In addition, if you have seen our Streetpilots fender taillight videos, and people sometimes say they have a little bit of a gap between, you can shimmy this fender by loosening off the sides forwards and backwards to cover off that gap and have your sequential fender taillight sit flush. And then once you have it adjusted, hold it in its place, retighten your two sides, and then everything will cinch up that gap. Now we have come to the next and probably the least fun part of the fender removal. You have 4 number 15 hex heads on the tire side of the subframe, and you have one annoying Allen on the inside that is also number 5 Allen holding this piece on. Now, to remove the one on the inside, to have the room to do it, you will probably need to remove your battery. Not a big deal. It is super easy. Maybe you can get to it without removing the battery, but I had to pull the battery. And then on the ones on this side, you can either get your hands in and use a number 15 wrench, but it might be awkward. Or if you are big brain like me, big brain but smooth brain, you can use a bunch of extensions with the U-joint to get at it from an offset angle and get the 4 number 15 hex head bolts out from the bike. So I am going to now show you how to remove those. Let's see this. So as you can see, you will see the hex head bolts. There's 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, but for the purposes of this video, everything is hand tight and the bottom ones are removed. In addition, the other bolt, the Allen bolt, is hidden underneath here, and it is threaded through back over here. So with all this junction of wires, sometimes it's very hard to get to it. To remove your upper fuse box, there's a little tab right here. Pull the tab, release the locks, remove this. And then now you can get down in here, and the bolt sits right over here down low. That's why if you have a very slim Allen key, you might be able to get it out. If not, you have to remove the battery. The battery is super easy to remove. Either use a number 10 millimeter wrench or a ratchet, or use a Phillips screwdriver, and you can disconnect the battery. Now, also you'll need to remove this 13 mil hex head bolt. Rules about DC voltage batteries, and this is very important, is when you disconnect the battery, negative comes off first, then you remove the positive, and then when you reinstall it, positive goes on first, and then negative goes on last. Because if you do it in the opposite direction and you pull off your positive first, you may short the battery or blow a bunch of fuses because your battery is still alive, your frame is still the ground, so if your power touches the ground, you will arc. So again, I reiterate this as the most important thing about batteries in the DC system: negative off first, negative on last. That's it. And then you get a one little number 5mm Allen here, and the subframe will come off. With the inside Allen removed, your battery removed and reinstalled, now you have to remove the number 15 hex head bolts that are located from this way, as we showed you just in the previous video. And with that being said, however you're doing it, I used a couple extensions with the U-joint, but for the purposes of this video, everything is hand tight. So we are just going to remove them to expedite the process. And just like that, your subframe is out. From this point, what do we do next? So let me show you how to install the 1920 solo seat. All right, so what's next? What you see in front of me is the 1920 solo seat plus a couple extra goodies. What you need is you're going to need the more square cut plate. Yes, it is a little bit still half moon here. I will provide the part number below, but this is the plastic plate that comes with the 1920 solo seat, but not always. This is the bobber plate. This is the one that mounts to the Streetpilots subframe plate and to the Tank Machine subframe plate. However, if you're not removing the rear fender, there is another plastic plate that comes with some of these 1920 solo seats that has a different curvature up here, and that one is intended to be used with the fender. So I will provide the part number of this one below, but this is the plastic plate you're going to want. You have your 1920 solo seat bracket, all the associated hardware. You have your 1920 solo seat. We wanted the one in black. In addition, solo seats will come with different bracketry. You are going to want this piece. This is the piece that is going to mount this plastic plate over here via these two holes at the back. It's going to mount this to a subframe plate of your choosing. We have the Streetpilots subframe plate, and as you guys know, there is a video showing how to install this. And then we have the Streetpilots Sequential Solo Taillight. So we're going to be throwing it all together. And because we're throwing it all together, there is a specific process. Now, in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the subframe plate first. We already have the foam installed onto it, so we are going to set this up beforehand. I know some of you have mentioned that you guys have a tough time lining these up. We were overly precise with the holes that we drilled in our plates for production. We measured them to the specs of the Scout Bobber, but due to weather, deviation of cold hot metals and stuff like that, we were overly precise. For the next production run, we will bore them out a little more to give you guys some more adjustability, but in the time being, wiggle jiggle, you'll get these in perfectly, or in some rare cases, we have had customers who just bored these out. This plate is aluminum, so it will not rust. So let's show you how to install this. This is the Streetpilots subframe plate. We are going to use the provided hardware, and we're going to line it up back to the screw. How this works is using our provided spacer that goes on the inside. You're going to set this bracket with the bolts towards the top on the back here. And for now, we are going to loosely set it in until we know how everything is going to sit. Lost my little hole. There we are. Like this. Now, reusing the 415 hex head bolts that are from your original subframe, we are going to mount the Streetpilots subframe plate to the bike. So check this out. Remember that these are your taillight connectors, so do not bury them underneath. Keep them fairly accessible. Sometimes some people will run them on this side of the wiring. They'll fold them over, such as right here, so you have other access to them. Some people run them at the back. Whatever floats your boat, but make sure that when you're installing it, so you don't have to do it twice, you do not cover stuff off. Additionally, you have a bunch of room over here, so all these big plugs, additional wiring, additional connectors can be tucked out of the way. So let's line this puppy up, and remember, do not bury these connectors. All right, and then we'll tighten those bolts at the bottom. Now these bolts up here are for the plastic upper plate, and for now we're going to remove them. They were just placeholders, so we didn't lose these. So voila, your subframe plate is almost installed. We just have to tighten these down. And as you know, in Streetpilots Garage, we like the German spec of good and tight. All right, then the next part is normally done just with this plastic plate. However, in our case, because we're running the Streetpilots Taillight, we are going to run the taillight through the plastic plate. And let me demonstrate. Take the taillight, the opening over here, put said taillight through the opening over here. Why do we do this? Is because we want to hide the wires. Over here at the bottom of the seat, you have little sharp corners. They're not sharp enough that they will cut your wire, but they are good entrances where your wire can be nicely passed through and hidden. Therefore, when you mount your 1920 solo seat, you don't have wires going everywhere. You want to have a clean install, run it through here, and I will demonstrate a close-up of how it looks. So let's do that next. The reason I ran it through like this is because we want to connect your taillight wiring prior to covering everything off, because otherwise afterwards we're not going to have the access. So again, connect the wiring first. This is slightly awkward if you're doing this by yourself or if your helper is the one videoing, but take these connectors that are provided with the Streetpilots Taillight and click these in. One, listen to satisfying clicks. One, and the second one. Clicked in, nice and tucked in. That's it. Little controller tucked in. Everything's nicely tucked in. Now, any wiring that we have to hide, we're gonna hide it right now. In this case, these fuses popped up. So what is gonna happen is I'm gonna pop the relay box out to give myself some access. Relay box is out, and I'm going to tuck the annoying wiring out of the way. One, two, and everything's tucked away. Now, for all you guys that are running license plates with license plate lights on this shock, on that shock, whatever, the Streetpilots provided a license plate wire extension. The cleanest way is not to run it over here. You can visibly see these wires even with the plastic cover on. The cleanest way to run this wire is, even on your stock subframe, there is an opening at the very bottom right here. So what you do is you feed your wire straight down for any shock mounted license plate. You can feed down your wiring, feed it down, and then once it gets to the bottom, takes a little bit of finagling, you fish it out. Now, if the camera comes to the side, what happens with this license plate wire is you can run it up your swing arm, tie wrap it a couple times up to your shock mount over here, and you'll have a nice wire tuck. So that's just a little tip. Now the camera comes back. Next thing is because we have to do the additional wire tuck, we have to put the battery box back in, click it back in. That's nice and clicked in. Fortunately, it wasn't audible. Tuck this in, dun, 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 dun. And now, on all this extra wiring, you lift your tank, slide the plastic cover under, tuck your wires under, and voila, all your wires are hidden. They're not sticking out here, or anything. All your wires are nice and tucked away. Now, the big thing here is when you secure this plate down, make sure that when you're doing so, what happens is that you don't accidentally pinch wires between the plate and the bracket that was underneath it. You can't crush a wire. So just make sure that nothing is going to be crushing like so. Remember, that plate is still loose. So what I'm doing right now is I'm gauging the adjustment I need to do on it. Do I need to raise that plate or lower that plate? Because the bolt hole for it is oval, and therefore it is adjustable higher or lower. You want your plastic plate sitting higher or lower. I prefer it sitting lower, so we're going to remove this plate for a minute and just secure that bolt a little bit lower. This is the bracket I'm talking about. This part here that we preemptively secured is oval, so this plate bracket can slide down and up, therefore affecting how high up and down your upper plastic plate sits. We want it a little bit lower, so using a 10, we are going to secure it a little bit lower, and then we're going to use a ratchet to cinch it down in the place where we want to hold it a little bit lower. So now that this is adjusted where we want it to be, this little bracket that comes with the 1920 solo seat, I will just show you guys a couple things. This is the tab over here that once you move it towards the right side, you can pull out your relay box and your fuse box. Additionally, there's more fuses for your lights and stuff underneath these vacuum lines. They're over here, they're buried. In addition, the 4 bolts that hold on your subframe that we reused for the Streetpilots subframe plate, the number 15 hex heads, now you can clearly see them. You will not be having such a good view when the stock Fender is on, but for clarity, here they are. And lastly, for all the ding-dongs out there that didn't understand what I was talking about, this is the little pin over here that holds on your stock seat. It is a hex 13 millimeter little nub that your stock seat pins to. And lastly, your tank is almost not attached here. There's a couple electrical lines and fuel lines and vacuum lines, but you can move your tank. So when you're putting the plastic cover back in, and I'll show this again, we're running the wiring and running it through here for a nice closed looking wire tuck, with everything tucked and out of the way. You lift the tank and you slide this cover back under, and now you carefully tuck all the wires back underneath, and now your cover is back and it's attached like this, and it will be secured with 2 little bolts provided with your 1920 solo seat. These are the 2 number 5 Allen little button head Allen bolts that are provided with your 1920 solo seat that will thread into that bracket, therefore keeping this nicely in. There you go, and then that will pinch this down. And then the next part will be installing the bracket and the solo seat. So now with everything secured, as you can see, the Streetpilots subframe plate, we kept it as a flat cut to keep the cost down. However, when it's properly mounted with the foam isolator, this is going to be the only portion that the foam is seen to cover off this gap right here and make it water resistant. And in addition, we kept the curvature all here so that it sits for a nice flush finish that is also easy on the wallet. To install your 1920 subframe, super easy. You are provided with 4 bolts. As you can see in my hand, some are longer and some are shorter. Thickness of this, longer ones go at the back and the shorter one will go at the front. This mounts over to here, and if the camera can capture it, as you can see, you have enough room for the wiring to pass underneath in that little horn, making a nice clean wire tuck. Are you capturing that? Perfection. Okay, so with that, we are now going to drop a bolt as it happens, and we're going to gently secure by hand the number 5 Allens. Yes, this bike loves number 5 Allens on just about everything. So we're going to secure this gently, get a couple threads in, and then using the provided hardware from the Streetpilots Solo Sequential Taillight, we're going to secure it from the seat down. Now, I know some of you guys want to mount it this way, and it kind of makes more sense, and I wish I thought of this when I made these, but we mount them underneath the seat with the Streetpilots logo facing down. Otherwise, if this is flipped, what's going to happen is your blinkers are going to be backwards. We want to have the Streetpilots logo facing downwards under the seat, and now we're going to, using the provided hardware, we're going to quickly secure that to your 1920 solo seat bracket so I don't have to keep holding it in between my legs. Like so. And now, fishing out the bolt that I dropped, there we are. loosely get it started. And if the camera comes over to this side with everything secured underneath, you could tie wrap the extension of this wire under the seat, but if you just feed it back under through that horn, you could hide all of the wiring underneath the plastic plate and have this wire be hidden, because the 1920 solo seat is going to cover this. So now, using a number 5 Allen and a number 4 Allen, we're going to secure everything to the frame of the bike. So, last part, 1920 solo seat. As you can see underneath, it has a little bit of a hook. The hook goes into this little slot right here to lock into the seat. And then underneath here, using again number 5 Allens, you secure that from underneath your bracket into the seat. And our tail light gives you the clearance to do this. So again, hook in first, find how it goes in, like that, so your nose can't come out. And then get your bolts nice and started. Again, our tail light does not get in the way. And now ensure that you secure these nice and snug. Big thing, a lot of stuff on this bike is aluminum. You do not need to have dumb strength to tighten things. Just German spec, good and tight, but be reasonable when it's tight and don't go too hard, otherwise you will strip stuff, because again, it is all aluminum. So let's finish it off. And with that, this completes the 1920 solo seat install, and let's give you a little bit of a light show. And voila, here is the finished product. A little 80s throwback for anybody who was a big fan of David Hasselhoff. Now, let's get ready for part 2, when we're going to do the Freedom Performance exhaust. Cheers.